I want to start with two zechrenes, two memories that I have from Farbrengen Beis that I participated in. And I want to say it off the bat because I don't want to forget to say it. The first one I was still a Bach, I was in 770. And Rabbi Raskin Farbrengen for us. Rabbi Raskin was basically the Menal of Temch Mimim. He was officially a Mashpia. Rabbi Raskin was one of the Rebbe's boys. And he had his hand in everything. He was involved in Tzach, he was involved in whatever he was involved. He was the Rebbe's Balkoire, Aguch, but he was also the Menal of the Yeshiva, Reb David. He was a very big chassid, Reb David Raskin. So we had a Farbrengen. It wasn't a very long Farbrengen, but I remember how he started the Farbrengen. He started Farbrengen by telling us a story. And I'm pushing telling the story because mitzvah l'saper. David Raskin, Harav David Raskin. Now I think they're all Aleim Hashalom. Harav Gedalia Korf, and Reb Shalom Arozov, and Beryl Unick came to America 3 or 4 days before the Frierdiker passed away.
Raskin came a month earlier. He joined the Yechida that came with Skailis.
A few days before. And in those days, in 770, there was a Matbea Ba'alechas, there was a category called the Rushasa. Thank you, sir. The Russians. They had a Rosh Hashiva. He was an incredibly good Rosh Hashiva, but he was a Misnagid, a Litvak, and he was a chazir about every minute of Seder Nigla. So the Amerikaner, like your Zayde, for example, Al Vashalim, they had an hour chassidus, 7:30, 8:30, 10 o'clock started Nigla. The Rosh said, "Well, the trouble." Eventually, the Rosh Hashiva left, and all the boys who learned by him will say that it was one of the biggest mistakes Lubavitch ever made. They had an hour and a half chassidus, so it was till 9 o'clock. They didn't start davening until 9:30. And the Stam between Bariches. So for them, Nigla started either 10:30 or 11, and then have Gusman das nicht Goydes given. It was called the Rushase. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was very protective of the Rosh Hashiva. But the Rebbe, our Rebbe, used to tell the Bacharim, "Mit afzach fidim with the Rosh Hashiva." He used to tell the American boys they should follow the Seder of the Rosh Hashiva. Anyway, they came mamish a few days before the Estalkus of Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Rebbe, our Rebbe, prepared them for the Yechidus. He told them what to do before. I'm just mentioning this also, this is Amay Meramuzgi. The Rebbe told them that they should put on a gattel underneath their jacket. The mocker of the minig for Bochrim, who don't wear a gattel during davening. So when you go to Yechidus, you put on a gattel under your jacket, is because the Rebbe, our Rebbe was madrich, the Bochrim who went into the Frierdiker Rebbe, that they should be Yechidus, they should wear a gattel underneath their jacket. So they went to Frierdiker Rebbe. I mean, I'll tell you, Shon, the ganze Wort. The Frierdiker Rebbe told them these words: Lernen darf man, davenen muss man, aber lernen darf man euch. Von Zeit zu Zeit wird rein, will mehr reden. And in English, it translates literally, you have to learn. You must daven, but you have to learn also. From time to time, you'll come in and we'll talk. So they walked out of Yechidus. They didn't understand what this means. You have to learn. You must daven, but you have to learn also. So they went to the Mashpia. The Mashpia was Shmuel Levitten, Olav Shalom, and Shmuel told them, "Lernen Chassidus darf man, davnen muss man, und Nigle darf man euch lernen." So Shmuel understood the Frierdiker Rebbe's Ramadan, and they never saw the Frierdiker Rebbe again. They probably went on Thursday night. The Frierdiker Rebbe saw Shabbos. Sunday. So they were here when Frierdiker passed away. And versteht sich, they were the first people to connect themselves to the Rebbe, who was then called the Ramash. And they, in as much as it's shaykh for a bocher to drain a kessel, they tried their best to help the Rebbe win the competition, as if it was such a thing. I mean, the Alter Chassidim were responsible for making Kvayachal the Nesias of the Rebbe start, but the Bacharim did what they could in verschiedene Eifanim. Naturally, there were 2 minyanim. The Frierdiker, the Rashag had a minyan, the Rebbe had a minyan, all the Bacharim davened with the Rebbe's minyan, the second minyan, the Ramash, and there was a Gedei to them, the Ramash. The Rebbe was very easy to love. The Rebbe was so easy to love. And the Rebbe's secretary, the Frierdiker Rebbe's secretary, who was the only secretary from the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Rebbe made his own, wrote to Alter Chassidim, "Ze kleiben sich arum wie fliegen." They're drawn to the Rebbe like a fly is drawn to light. The magnetism was unbelievable. So Rabbi David Raskin told us the following story. that the Bachrim went into the Rebbe's Gesundsein on Beis Nissen. Beis Nissen is the yahrzeit of the Rebbe Rashab. But if it's the yahrzeit of the Rebbe Rashab, it's Taschol Sanasi, the Rebbe, of Vedic Rebbe. In other words, Beis Nissen then was like Os Yud Shvat. It was a big day. They went into the Rebbe Beis Nissen, but they didn't give the Rebbe notice. They went in on the day, and they asked the Rebbe if the Rebbe would Farbrengen. This is how he told us the story. So the Rebbe went over to the wall. He took the calendar off the wall, the luach off the wall. He looked at the luach, and he looked up at the Bachrim, and he said, in Achedesh Harum Beis Iyar, in a month from now, Beis Iyar, they came in Beis Nissen. In Achedesh Harum Beis Iyar. Now, why did the Rebbe not Farbrengen Beis Nissen, wait till Beis Iyar? The simplest cheshbon is the Rebbe needed to put it in their schedule. The Rebbe just couldn't azay. And Misamos and jede Sache hat Pnimius and Pnimius the Pnimius. But this is the sipur that the Rebbe said in Achedesh Harum Beis Iyar. Now, if you could picture the small zal upstairs, you know the small Beis Medrash upstairs. I've been doing that much. So if you go into the small zal upstairs, there's one table that runs east to west on the northern wall. Where the clock is, there's a table that runs this way. Then there's a table that runs here on this side of the Aron Kodesh, a table that runs in this side of the Kodesh, and in the back of the room there's two tables that run the length of the Beis Medrash, north to south, and then underneath the windows there's another table going east to west. Right? Could you picture what I'm saying? Yeah. There's two tables this way, two here, and two here. There's a door. There's a door in the back of the Beis Medrash. There's a door. That door was created when the Rebbe started giving dollars, because the Bacham Pasha couldn't get into the Beis Medrash. There used to be a window there. The Rebbe sat by the head of that table. Before the Rebbe was Rebbe, when the Rebbe became Rebbe, he sat under the windows, in the small zal upstairs in the middle of the table. But when the Rebbe Farbrengen b'chai from Friedrich Rebbe, and that continued the whole first year till Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph. In other words, if you could picture the two tables at the back of the room, the Rebbe sat on this side of the table facing this way. The Rebbe said about himself that his place is in Durham. All the Rebbeim sat in Durham. Durham means when you face east, it's to the right. The Rebbe's place is Mizrach Durham. So Rabbi Yossi Paltiel with his back to Durham, that was in Ma'ariv, facing Tzofim, with his back to this, he sat at the head of the table. That was the Rebbe's regular place.
He sat on the other side of the table.
No, Biklau.
Against the wall.
No, Biklau. No, he sat at the head of the table. The table is like this. The Rebbe sat here. This is the wall.
So there's a table in back of him.
There's a table behind it. There's two tables like this. Here's the windows. The Rebbe sat here facing this way. Wait, here's the end of the story. The Rebbe walked into the Zal. I don't know how many Bacham were there. And they prepared for the Rebbe a seat right here at the head of the table. The Rebbe put his hand on the table and he flung himself over the table and landed on the Ma'ariv side. You understand? The Rebbe was standing here. His place was there, yeah? He put his hand on the table and he flipped himself over the table, landed over there. He sat over here in Ma'ariv in the middle of the table and he fell. This was the story that Rabbi Raskin told us. They asked the Rebbe to Farbrengen Beis Nissen, and the Rebbe looked at the calendar and said, "In Achedesh Harum Beis Iyar," and Achedesh Harum they came to Farbrengen, but he didn't sit in what was then his regular place. He literally flipped over the table and sat in the middle. So Rabbi David told us the Maaseh, and then he said, Rabbi Raskin had a very, very pronounced W instead of an L. This was the Rebbe's way of doing lechatchila ribber. I mean, the Farbrengen of Beis Iyar is printed. But this is what the Rebbe did. This is the Hanhaga of the Rebbe. This is the first story that I wanted to share. The second story I wanted to share is this. I'm doing this partially so you should bother me tomorrow to look for the recording. It must be 13 or 14 years or more. Rabbi Yosef Weinberg came to Farbrengen. Rabbi Weinberg is gone many years already. Russell Weinberg. He was born Ayin Ches, you know that? He'd be alive today, he'd be 101, 103. So it was at least 10 years ago. He came to Farbrengen here Beis Iyar. I have a recording of the Farbrengen, and I'm very happy to share it. I recorded the whole Farbrengen. So the Monday morning, I have to look for it. My Yetzer Hara needs to be very carefully coddled, and I want to find it. He Farbrengen. In the Farbrengen, I'm a little bit embellishing, but it's okay. He spoke about the chitas of today. Tanya chitas of today. Not tomorrow, not Beis Iyar, today's chitas. Tomorrow's chitas of Perek Mem Dalet. Today's Tanya is the last piece of Perek Mem Gimel. It's a short shiur, right? It's 2/3 of an amud. In today's Shir Tanya, the Alter Rebbe discusses the idea of Yid and Ava. And he says, as a rule, first of all, you have to have both midas. Ava's a little bit Yid is not enough, right? You have to have Zochar Chaste, you have to midas Ava, you have to have midas, you have to have both. But he says, as a rule, first comes Yida and then comes Ava. Except by special situations, rare people, Yechidei Skula, that by them there's Ava before Yida. Ki Rabbi Yossi ben Derdaya, right? You remember the Tanya? It's today's Tanya. Like Rabbi Yossi ben Derdaya died from doing tshuva, but it was a tshuva me'ava, it wasn't a tshuva me'yida. From tshuva me'yida, it wouldn't have died. So this is how the Tanya, today's Chita says, that it's at the end of today's Shir, that the cloud, the Seder is first Yida then Ava. And there's a Yitzim in a cloud. Some people have Ava before Yida, K'mei Rabbi Yossi ben Derdaya. Now, I'm a little bit putting words into his mouth, but he made this connection. In order to explain this, he told a story. The story took him 45 minutes. I'm not going to tell the story for 45 minutes. I'm not such a good storyteller. The story didn't happen with me, so I don't know all the details. But I want to tell the story. I always remember that if I bring Beis Iyar, because I remember that he spoke about the Tanya. This is the story. Rabbi Weinberg was an Ish Mitzuyan. He was an Ish Mitzuyan, an Ish Miyuchad. Everything he did was so precise. He was very chassidish. He was an emissary, very talented man. He traveled all over the world. He raised millions and millions of dollars for Tem Chatmim, and raised millions of dollars for Maimid. He was a chassid, and the Rebbe used to send him in all kinds of different Shlichus. He used to go into the Frierdiker Rebbe. When he came here from Montreal, and the Rebbe called him in, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and said that the Rashag, the Rebbe's older son-in-law who had the yeshiva, is having a very hard time, and he asked Rabbi Weinberg to work with the Rashag. Those were the words I heard this from my Mechutin, that the Frierdiker Rebbe said to Rabbi Weinberg, you should be le'ezer alachi samach for the Rashag. So he worked in the yeshiva all the years. He also did a lot of other things. The Shura B'Sefer Natanya, he did many different things. So he had a mice with the Frierdiker. It was a funny story. It was a modern mice. Every time he went on a Shlichus, he went into a Yechidus, and he came back from Shlichus, went into Yechidus again. He was once the Frierdiker Rebbe's Cheder, and Mitamol Geder Rebbe Azov, Frierdiker Rebbe tells him. And remember, for the Frierdiker Rebbe, every word was anstrengend. It was hard for him to talk, so the words were very measured. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, as it's coming in a Platz, you'll come to a place, und du wirst treffen a Yidden, and you'll meet a Jew. Und du wirst darfen weggehen, and you'll need to leave. Sollst du ihm sagen, du wirst kommen zurück. Tell him that you're going to come back. Mamish, it was cryptic. The words made no sense. This is what it is. Come in a Platz. Come to a place, and you'll meet a Jew, and you'll have to leave. Tell him you're going to come back. This is the story. Now, one other story. I do not know if these two stories happened at the same time, but I'm telling it to you anyway. Beim Frierdiker Rebbe, mir gewinnt zwei Storien für Yechidus. Beim Frierdiker Rebbe, there were two types of Yechidus. There were people who went into Yechidus in what's called the times of Yechidus. The Frierdiker Rebbe, at times, you would see people. When you went into Frierdiker Rebbe, at times, Yechidus, the Rebbe was sitting with his hat, or maybe even with a streimel, with a gartel, and the table was clear. When he got off, he said, Mensch. But then there were people who went into Yechidus and Frierdiker Rebbe in the middle of the day, for Askonis. If you went into the Frierdiker Rebbe in the middle of the day, there was no schedule. Whenever you had to go in, you went in. In other words, the mosquitoes, with the secretaries. When you walked into the Rebbe Shleibus Mana Yechidus, the Frierdiker Rebbe was sitting without a hat. He was sitting in his yarmulke. And he was writing. Frierdiker Rebbe was writing. Nachanan geschrieben. You would walk into the Rebbe would take a blank piece of paper and cover the paper that he was writing. You shouldn't see. He would look up at you, and whatever exchange was, you would talk, he would talk. How did the Yechidus end? The Rebbe would take off the blank piece of paper and continue to write, and this was Zay Yizud. In other words, as soon as you finish your business, the Rebbe went back to his work, and you would walk out. The last time Rabbi Weinberg in Frierdiker Rebbe, he went in Shalei B'Shas Yechidus. He went in other words, in Mitten Tag, not in a normal time of Yechidus. The Rebbe was sitting in a yarmulke. He went in for Askonis, for Shlichus. The Rebbe covered the paper. The Yechidus was finished. And he knows the cue. The Rebbe goes back to writing. Then it's time for him to walk out, but the Rebbe doesn't go back to writing. The Rebbe's looking at him. And he's backing out of the room. And the Rebbe's looking. The Rebbe followed him at the door until he left. This was it's Adav Yidor, but the Rebbe is Malave. A Rebbe accompanies a Chassid. This is the last time they're going to see each other. He didn't understand the significance of it, but he never saw the Friedrich again. This was goodbye. The Friedrich ist Malave gewesen und it's been doch wenn you schwat ist es. Fast forward 18 years. It's 1968, 69. Another Maimon Amuzgid, another parenthesis. Rabbi Weinberg was a fundraiser for the Lubavitch Yeshiva for Temple Community. He raised a lot of money. He had a dream. He sees the Friedrich Rebbe. And the Friedrich Rebbe says to him, Yossel, Rabbi Yossi, whatever he called him, es wird gewähne a gleiche Sach, a du sollst tun a bissel vermeinet. It would be a good thing if you'll do, you're talking working for the yeshiva, and a fundraiser can't split his fundraising, it's not equitable. You should do a little bit for Maimid, a little bit for Maimid. So he came into the Rebbe, Yechidus, the Iyar Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe that he had a dream. The Friedrich Rebbe said, as Otana Bisselfam, he was a fundraiser for the yeshiva, and the Rebbe told Otana Bisselfam Maimid. So he asked the Rebbe, what did you do with this dream? So the Rebbe told him, it's a good dream, you should do it. But since it says Chalim is Shavi Dabedo, every Chalim is a little bit for Betelim, so you shouldn't do a bissel for Maimid, you should do a Sach for Maimid. So a little bit for Maimid, a Sach for Maimid. And I heard this from other people. I heard this Mendel Drizzen, who was on the board of Lubavitch Yeshiva. He raised tons of money for Maimid, for the Rebbe, and the money he raised for the Rebbe, he didn't take a percent. No, there was no parnasa in it. What he raised for the Yeshiva, he took a percentage. What he raised for the Rebbe, it was reine Geld. He was in Brazil. He used to travel to countries with a lot of rich Jews. He had a lot of chayin. He was a very lovable man. He was an amazing fundraiser. He was a good fundraiser, and he was also good for the job because he had a lot of chayin. He's in Brazil, and people come over with him. There's a problem. There's a man who's incredibly wealthy, a multi-millionaire. He's so rich that he owned an island off the mainland of Brazil. I don't know if it's East Coast or West Coast. He owned an island. He owned an island where him and his family lived. And there was a ferry that attached them to the mainland. But he's incredibly frei, incredibly estranged. He doesn't know what Yom Kippur is. He doesn't know what Chanukah is. He doesn't know what Amatz is. Nothing. But he has a deep love for the Eibishter. He's beklal not frum, but his ava to the Eibishter is real. He pushes. Not only he believes in the Eibishter, Hatam pushes leave. That's why he was connected to the Tanya. There's rare people, but there's ava fayu kumeda, but also benudaya. Rabbi Weinberg said about this person, this must be Mr. Safra. I'm assuming that this is Mr. Safra. He was completely not from mamish nothing. Aber pushet lieb gehad the Eibishter. How did this love for the Eibishter express itself? Considering that Gonesh gewusst, he was going to spend tens of millions of dollars then to build a gigantic interfaith center, to build a house of worship where all religions would come, the Christians, the Muslims, the Yidden, because he had no concept of das and and he separated us from the nations. He didn't have those inyonim in his, he didn't know him. But he loved Hashem, and he wanted to do something for the Eibishter. And the Yidden in Brazil felt it would be a terrible thing because he was such a powerful man and he would have invested so much money, it would have drawn Yidden there. And it couldn't be. This interfaith center cannot be built. So they said to Rabbi Weinberg, many people have tried and you can't even get through the door. $5 manon, it's like you're nothing. Maybe you could try. So, I forgot a very important detail. I'm sorry, I just ruined the whole story. When he was going to Brazil, and that Shlichus, he went into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe says to him, the Rebbe should helfen, and das Matzliach sein in the Shlichus, and the Rebbe pauses, and he says, the Shlichus in Hagluyim and the Shlichus in Hanistar. Before he left, he tells him, you should succeed in your mission, then the Rebbe stops, the revealed missions and the hidden missions. Now go back to the story. He's in Brazil, and they tell him that many people have tried to talk to this person, and it's mamish going no place. He said, "Okay, try." So you had to get onto the island. You had to make a permission. Whether you went by ferry or you flew, he got permission to come to the island and meet this man. And he met him. He met him. He met his wife. He met his kids. He spent 5 days there. In other words, he got to them. Rabbi Weinberg had a way to their heart. He knew what buttons to push. That's a idiot. When the 5 days was over, he was still building his interfaith center. But he was so much warmed up to Rabbi Weinberg. So without realizing it, Rabbi Weinberg says to him, I need to leave, but I'll come back. Anyway, he's sitting on the airplane flying back to New York, and it flashes in his mind that 20 years earlier, the Frierdiker Rebbe said to him, you'll come to a place and you'll meet a Jew and you'll have to leave. Tell him you'll return. And he, at vergessen, after he told him, I'm going to come back. So he was dizzy. Before the Shlichus, the Rebbe says to him, and the Shlichus nanestorm. And he hears mamish the same words that he heard from Frierdiker. And when he came back for the Shlichus, he was oismensch. He went into the Rebbe. I think he wrote a note. And he told the whole story. He told the story to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he reminded the Rebbe, that the Rebbe told him about being matzliach and the Shlichus and the story. And he asked the Rebbe if this is what the Frierdiker Rebbe meant. And this is what the Rebbe meant. So when the Frierdiker Rebbe said to him 20 years before, tell him you'll come back, he meant this. And that when the Rebbe told him on this occasion, Zogen, the Shlichus and the story, did he mean this? So Weinberg said the Rebbe didn't answer the question directly, but the answer was a clear yes. The way the Rebbe responded was a confirmation of both. That this is what the Frierdiker Rebbe meant, and this is what he meant. Anyway, when he was going back to Brazil, he went to Yiddish again. I told the Rebbe he's going to Brazil, he's going to meet this person. So the Rebbe said, okay, Shmatzliach and the Shlichus, they shouldn't build interfaith center. Shmashliach to raise money from this person for the yeshiva, for Maimed, whatever he was going to use the money for. And then the Rebbe get azog. Loy daina hasogas. You should have success with him in fundraising, in your understanding of what's a lot of money. Because what I think a lot of money is beyond even this person. And then the Rebbe thinks for a second, the man, no. So sein like meine Sagesech. He swings his hand. No, ich will like meine Sagesos. Anyway, back to this person, and he spent time with him. Weinberg told us that in the 1970s, they made Miftzah Kashrus and Miftzah Mezuzah. They were incredibly expensive. Lubavitch paid for anybody who brought mezuzah. Lubavitch paid mezuzahs. Literally millions of mezuzahs. Any person who kashed in his house, the Rebbe paid half the tzah of kash in the kitchen. New pots, new pans. All of that money came from this one man. When the Rebbe says, he gave the Rebbe so much money that the entire tzah of Miftzah Mezuzah and the entire tzah of Miftzah Kachas came from one source. It was millions and millions of dollars in the 1970s. $1 was $1 then, more than today. And he finished the story by saying that on one of his trips to Brazil, he said to Mr. Safra that he wants him to meet the Rebbe. He says, why do you mean to meet the Rebbe? Because I want the Rebbe to give you suggestions in your philanthropy. It was a very big tzedakah. The Rebbe should teach you how to give tzedakah, where to put your money. So he said to Rabbi Weinberg, he said, I'm prepared to meet the Rebbe, but I'm not his chassid, you understand? I'm not a yes man. I'll hear what he has to say and I'll take an advisement. The Rebbe gave him a lot of suggestions, including some pretty radical suggestions. In America, there were big foundations with billions of dollars in it that support Jewish causes. But B'klal, these are not frum foundations. The Rebbe suggested to Mr. Safra and one more person to make their own foundation to support frum meisters. And they listened. There's a lot of money comes to every frum meister all over the world. From one foundation that the Safra set up to you push it to frum meisters. So he says to Rabbi Weinberg, they're walking up Kingston Avenue. He says, you remember the first time I met the Rebbe? And I said to you that I'm going to go to listen to what the Rebbe has to say, but I'm not necessarily going to accept his words. The Rebbe said, yeah. And they're walking up the street. He says, now, if the Rebbe says to put my money here, and he points at a sewer, I don't say boo. Now, the Rebbe says put money, he points at a sewer, I'm not going to say boo. So these are two stories came to the Beis Iyar. One happened Beis Iyar, one I heard on Beis Iyar. Sheina Maisis. Okay, l'chaim v'levracha. Chaim. So anyway, what I prepared to say, I said. I wanted to tell these two stories before I forget. The building on Crown and Albany he built. Rabbi Weinberg said to me that Safra was a businessman. If he gave you money, he wanted to see how you spent it. If you spent it well, he gave you more. He pushed it one day, he was driving, he drove by the building, and he saw where the construction was holding. So he calls up Weinberg, he said to Weinberg, a birdie told me, a little bird told me, that if the building will be ready by such and such a date, maybe there'll be money for another floor. And that's what happened.